The 58th International Art Exhibition in Venice kicked off with the title May You Live in Interesting Times, which hints at the challenging times we're living in. As well as establishing a market for contemporary art and opening new possibilities for artists, Venice Biennale is regarded as the Art Olympics, since there are almost 80 participants from countries around the world. Even though the organizers insist that Venice Biennale has no themes, migration and political injustices seem to be prominent. There are many sections that place refugees in the center of their artwork, while there is strong debate among the artists as to whether or not art should try to change society through strong messages, sarcasm, and criticism.
No, there's no messages. There might be questions. I think the job of artists is to raise questions about things and to raise questions about how we look at things, about the categories we use to order our world. And then the work is up to us to develop a message. Artists live in the same world we do. They read the news, they respond to things, but there are no themes in this Biennale. There are subjects that arise, but it's different from having a theme. There's work that's quite abstract, but usually it has some social connection.
And espousing the idea that artists are merely questioning what's happening around the world is the display of this shipwreck. In 2015, 900 immigrants lost their lives after a fishing boat sank in the Mediterranean Sea, and the remains of the boat are now shown at the Venice Biennale without any explanation.
With nods to political nihilism, violence, and the homogenizing corporate powers of today, this edition's topics may be dynamic. But is the same true for the Biennale as a whole? Joining us from London to answer that question and others is Professor Jean Wainwright. Hi, Jean, welcome to Showcase. How do you think the Biennale did this year, trying to address this idea of may you live in interesting times?
Well, I think Ralph Rogoff did an incredible job, actually. What a provocative title. And this seemed to really capture the imagination of the artists that were presented this year, whether it be in the pavilions or indeed in Ralph's two presentations, A and B, which kind of reflected each other in different ways. But what I loved this year was we saw all kinds of different political works, whether it was films or performances, or indeed, Lincoln's chair being whipped by hoses, or very provocative war films. Each work seemed to give us a different impression of what's happening in our times right now, our turbulent political times. Even when you walked into the Giardini and you saw the empty, derelict area around the Venezuelan Pavilion, there was a real feeling of, yes, this is going to somehow have a very special feeling this time, this Biennale.
So was this edition more political than usual, you think?
Yes, it was. I think what was fascinating was to see representations by artists we may have seen before in other places, but coming together. A lot of representation of black artists and people of colour, a lot more women being presented, but also I think it was more political.
So the top award went to Lithuanian Pavilion. Do you think that was a good choice?
I think it was a great choice. I think the point about the Lithuanian Pavilion is you look down on this beach with kind of sun, sea and sand and people sunbathing, applying sun lotion, and then this opera for 13 voices. And somehow the poignancy of that, the understanding of perhaps how people enjoy themselves, but also the undertones of ordinariness put together with some kind of rousing emotion in ourselves. And let's face it, having an emotion in yourself is what drives both political agendas, but also drives art. So I think it was a great choice, actually.
And there are several different awards and special mentions and all that, but I wonder what you enjoyed the most.
Well, enjoying the most, I think there was so much variety to see. I really enjoyed the French Pavilion, but I didn't have to queue for it. And I would like to say, for anybody planning to go to Venice, that queuing, of course, does somehow diminish sometimes seeing something. But the French Pavilion, I thought, was fascinating. The way you went through it, the way you walked through it, the way you moved through it, the different sensations under your feet, etc., I think really made a difference.
And Jean, Ghana participated for the first time, and a lot of people said that it was a very strong pavilion, but I wonder what you thought about it.
It was a strong pavilion. You walked in, it was glorious. Al-Anusi's fantastic presentation with all those bottle tabs around the room like a glorious tapestry, but also the films, the photographs, and the kind of cross-references to works that were in other pavilions. I loved the fact that Ghana was there. I loved the fact that the president of the country was supporting it, that the First Lady of Ghana was there at the initial press opening. But I also loved the different representations of the ages of the artists there, from 80 to the oldest photographer, the first documentary photographer in Ghana, to younger artists. And I think that really made it very, very special.
And how did you like Israeli Pavilion? It was provocative, wasn't it?
Israel, I think, was difficult for some people. You walked into a field hospital, effectively, into a waiting room where a number was there. And I'm sure if we've ever had to wait in doctors' waiting rooms or hospitals, we really get that feeling. So this needed time and duration, but it was really worth the effort. You sat there, you then went upstairs, you got a band that actually diagnosed you for what film that you would actually see, what presentation you would see. There were lots of different aspects to it, and I really liked the balance of that. The politics of it, the personal story by the artist, the film, the lawyer explaining actually about the ramifications of the film. Then afterwards, you got an aftercare bracelet, having seen the film, having gone through these various stages. People who stayed with it, I think, got a great deal out of it. And we do need these pavilions. And I will say one thing about the Biennale this year, this Biennale, was that there are a lot of works that need time and duration. There was Denmark's, for example, that needed a long time to watch it, 25 minutes, but it was so worth it to see the kind of idea of the apocalypse, perhaps to make us think about what happens with nature. And so all those aspects came together, often with quite ponderous, quite long films, but the rhythmic curation, I think the way you went from one place to another, from darkness, very dark spaces, to light, really created for me a great experience. It's certainly a Biennale that I will be going back to and will be absolutely sitting and watching those films again and looking at those presentations.
Thank you, Jean Wainwright, for joining us on Showcase today. Great overview, as always.